The champagne had gone flat in Alina Sinclair's hand, just like everything else in her life, from the floor-to-ceiling windows of their Manhattan penthouse. She watched her husband Marcus command the room below, like the corporate king he believed himself to be. 25 years of marriage, she had become nothing more than an elegant ghost haunting the edges of his empire. Marcus Sinclair. The name alone could move markets. CEO of Titan Global, a shipping and logistics empire worth $12 billion. Tonight, he was celebrating the completion of the Aurora deal, a merger that would cement his legacy as one of America's most ruthless business titans. The penthouse buzzed with the city's elite, senators, hedge fund kings, and their trophy wives who looked at Alina with a mixture of pity and fear. Pity for what she'd become, fear that they might be next. Alina had once been the envy of every woman in their circle. Brilliant, beautiful, and blessed with the kind of old money grace that couldn't be bought. She'd graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Business School, turning down offers from Goldman Sachs and McKinsey to marry the charming, ambitious boy from Brooklyn who promised her the world. Instead, he gave her a gilded cage.
Mrs. Sinclair.
The voice belonged to Rebecca Ashford, Marcus's new head of strategic development. 28 years old, razor-sharp intellect, and legs that went on for miles. She approached with the confidence of a woman who knew exactly what she wanted and was about to get it. Alina turned, her smile as practiced as a diplomat's. Rebecca, congratulations on the Aurora success. Marcus speaks so highly of your contributions. Rebecca's green eyes glittered with something that might have been amusement or triumph. He's an extraordinary leader, so visionary, so passionate about his work. The word passionate hung in the air like perfume, expensive, cloying, impossible to ignore. Lena had smelled that same perfume on Marcus's shirts for months. She'd found the credit card statements. 5-star hotels in cities where Titan Global had no business. Jewelry purchases that never made it home. Weekend conferences that somehow required only 2 attendees. Passion is essential in business, Elena replied, her voice never wavering. I've always believed the most. Successful ventures require careful planning, long-term thinking, the ability to see all the moving pieces. Rebecca laughed, a sound like crystal breaking. How wonderfully old-fashioned. In today's market, you have to be willing to make bold moves. Take what you want. The meek don't inherit anything but crumbs. If only she knew, Elena thought, watching. Her husband across the room, Marcus, was surrounded by board members, his booming laugh echoing off the marble walls. At 52, he was still devastatingly handsome, silver at his temples. Lines that spoke of wisdom rather than age, the kind of commanding presence that made lesser men step aside. He caught her looking and raised his glass with a smile that had once made her heart race. Now it felt like a knife between her ribs. Ladies, are you plotting the downfall of civilization? The voice belonged to Senator Richard Hayes, a longtime family friend who'd known Alina since she was a girl. Just discussing business strategy, Alina said smoothly.
No.
Rebecca was sharing her philosophy on taking what you want. The senator's weathered face creased into a knowing smile. Dangerous territory that. I've learned that the most successful people are often the ones you never see coming, the quiet ones who've been playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. Rebecca excused herself with a dismissive nod, clearly bored by the old man's wisdom. Alina watched her glide toward Marcus, her red dress, a declaration of war against subtlety. She doesn't know, does she? Senator Hayes murmured. Alina sipped her flat champagne. Know what? Who you really are? It's what you're really worth? His eyes twinkled with mischief. Your grandfather would be proud, you know. Donovan Croft taught you well. Donovan Croft, just thinking his name brought back memories of summer afternoons in his study, learning about compound interest and corporate structure while other girls her age were learning to braid friendship bracelets. Her grandfather hadn't just been a successful investor, he'd been a strategist. A chess master who thought in decades rather than quarters. Never let your security depend on someone else's goodwill, little bird, he used to say. Build your own nest, even if you never have to use it, especially if you never have to use it. The nest he'd helped her build was magnificent. Hidden in plain sight, managed by his most trusted advisor, growing steadily for over 2 decades. While Marcus built his empire with debt and bravado, Alina had been quietly, methodically building something else entirely. Power. Real power. The kind that didn't need to announce itself with booming laughter and expensive suits. Across the room, Marcus was whispering something in Rebecca's ear that made her throw back her head and laugh. The sound cut through Alina like a blade, not because it hurt. That capacity for pain had died somewhere around year 15 of their marriage. But because it was so perfectly predictable, this was how it always happened in their world. The aging titans grew bored with their wives, the women who'd helped build their empires. They traded them in for younger models with hungrier hearts and emptier morals. The discarded wives usually took their settlements and faded into obscurity. Bitter, broken women who'd learned too late that love was just another commodity to be bought and sold. Marcus thought Alina would follow that script. Take her alimony, sign her NDAs, and to disappear into the kind of comfortable relevance that money could buy. He had no idea that she'd been writing a different ending all along. Alina, darling. Marcus appeared at her side with the sudden grace of a predator. Senator Hayes, always a pleasure. Marcus. The senator's tone was carefully neutral. Congratulations on Aurora, though I hope you haven't bitten off more than you can chew. Some deals look golden on paper, but turn toxic in practice. Marcus's smile never faltered, but Alina caught the flash of irritation in his eyes. With respect, Senator, that's old thinking. Today's market rewards bold action. The timid get left behind, and the reckless get burned, Alina said quietly. Both men looked at her in surprise. She so rarely spoke at these gatherings, had become such a fixture in the background that her voice seemed to startle them. Marcus recovered first, his politician's smile sliding back into place. My wife has always been ... cautious. It's charming, really. It's very traditional. Traditional. The word was a dismissal, a pat on the head. In Marcus's world, traditional meant obsolete, irrelevant, safe to ignore. He couldn't have been more wrong. As the evening wound down and the last guests filtered out into the Manhattan night, Alina stood at the window watching the city sparkle below. Soon, very soon, it would be time to step out of the shadows and into the light. Time to show them all who had really been in control from the very beginning. The quiet ones, after all, are always the most dangerous. 3 weeks after the Aurora celebration, Alina sat in her private study, the one room in their penthouse that Marcus never entered, dismissing it as Alina's book corner. Ironic, considering this modest space was the command center of an empire he couldn't even imagine. The divorce papers had arrived that morning, delivered by a courier in a crisp uniform. Thornton and Associates, Marcus's attack dogs, famous for their scorched earth approach to high-stakes divorces. Alina hadn't opened the envelope yet. She knew what it contained, a generous settlement by most standards, utterly insulting by the standards of what she'd actually contributed to building. Marcus's empire, $20-5 million, a penthouse in the Hamptons, a monthly alimony of $200,000, all contingent, of course, on a non-disclosure agreement that would ensure her silence until the day she died. Marcus thought he was being magnanimous. He had no idea he was offering to buy back a fraction of what already belonged to her. Her phone rang, a secure line known only to 3 people in the world. Alina. The voice belonged to James Whitmore, her grandfather's former attorney, and indeed the architect of the most sophisticated financial structure she'd ever seen. At 78, he was still sharp as a blade. James, I assume you've seen the news? TMZ broke it an hour ago? Billionaire CEO Marcus Sinclair files for divorce from wife of 25 years to marry company executive. The photos are ... unflattering, Alina walked to her window. Even from 40 floors up, she could see the paparazzi gathered like vultures on the street below. Marcus's affair was no longer a whisper. It was a headline. Rebecca's calculated risk had paid off. She'd forced Marcus's hand by leaking the story herself, ensuring he couldn't back down without looking weak. Are we ready? Lena asked. The Nightingale Trust has been acquiring shares for 24 years through 17 different shell companies. As of yesterday's market close, You control 52.3% of Titan Global. Marcus owns 31%, the board holds 12%, and the remaining 4.7% is public float. Alina smiled for the first time in weeks. He never suspected. Why would he? You've been the perfect corporate wife. Silent, supportive, invisible. He sees what he expects to see, a woman dependent on his success rather than the architect of it. The irony was exquisite. While Marcus had been building Titan Global through leverage, acquisitions, and sheer force of personality, Alina had been quietly buying it out from under him. Every share purchased through carefully structured investment vehicles, each transaction designed to look like routine institutional investment. Her grandfather had set it up perfectly before his death. Never let them see the full picture, little bird, he'd told her. Power is most effective when it's invisible. There's more, James continued. Our forensic accountants have finished their analysis of the Aurora deal. It's worse than we suspected. Alina's jaw tightened. How much worse? The deal is structured with floating interest rates tied to commodity futures. Shipping costs rise more than 12%, which our models suggest is inevitable given the current supply chain disruptions.
Titan Global will be on
the hook for penalty payments that could exceed their liquid reserves. Marcus mortgaged the company's future for a headline. Precisely. He needed Aurora to make the Forbes cover, to cement his legacy. He was so focused on the prize, he ignored the price. Alina closed her eyes. This was what she'd feared, what she'd tried to warn him about, in the subtle ways available to a traditional wife. Marcus had grown reckless, drunk on his own success, making bigger and bigger bets with other people's money, other people's lives. Timeline? She asked. The Aurora penalties will trigger in approximately 4 months, assuming current trends continue. But we won't need to wait that long. The divorce filing gives us the opening we need. Alina nodded. Marcus had made his choice. Now she would make hers. That evening, she attended the Children's Hospital Gala alone, as Marcus was tied up in meetings with his divorce attorneys. The society reporters noted her solo appearance with the kind of salacious glee that turned personal tragedy into entertainment. Alina, darling, how are you holding up? The question came from Patricia Melbourne, the wife of Titan's largest independent shareholder. Her concern was as genuine as her Botox. I'm focusing on what matters, Alina replied smoothly. Oh, the foundation work, the hospital board. It's amazing how clearly you can think when the distractions are removed. Patricia's eyes gleamed with gossip hunger. I heard Rebecca is already redecorating Marcus's office. Bold choice, considering the divorce isn't final. Rebecca is certainly confident in her position. What Patricia didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Alina had been the hospital's largest anonymous donor for 15 years. The Melbourne Foundation thought they were the primary benefactors, but Alina's contributions filtered through various trusts and foundations, dwarfed theirs by a factor of 10. She'd been building goodwill, establishing relationships, creating a network of allies who knew her not as Marcus Sinclair's wife, but as a force for good in her own right. When the time came to step into the light, she wouldn't be starting from zero. The gala was a strategic opportunity. Alina moved through the crowd with grace, having quiet conversations with board members, major investors, and media executives. To observers, she looked like a woman seeking comfort in familiar social circles. In reality, she was a general positioning her troops. Mrs. Sinclair. The voice belonged to David Chen, the youngest member of Titan's board, and the one most likely to question Marcus's recent decisions. I wanted to express my support during this difficult time. Alina studied his face. David was brilliant, ambitious, and most importantly, unimpressed by Marcus's bullying leadership style. He'd be a crucial ally in what was coming. Thank you, David, though I have to say I'm feeling more optimistic than difficult. Sometimes change, even painful change, opens up possibilities we never imagined. He raised an eyebrow. That's a remarkably positive outlook. I've had excellent teachers. My grandfather always said that the best investors see opportunity where others see crisis. Your grandfather was Donovan Croft, wasn't he? Legend in the industry? I didn't realize. Alina smiled mysteriously. There are many things about me. That might surprise you, David. Perhaps we should have lunch sometime. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Titan's future direction. As she walked away, she could feel his curious gaze following her. The seeds were planted. Now, they just needed time to grow. Back at home, Marcus was pacing in his study, phone pressed to his ear. Even through the closed door, Elena could hear the tension in his voice. The divorce was already proving more complicated than he'd expected. His lawyers were encountering resistance they hadn't anticipated, mysterious delays, unexpected document requests, procedural complications that turned simple filings into bureaucratic nightmares. What Marcus didn't understand was that Elena wasn't just playing defense. Every delay gave her more time to position her pieces, to prepare for the moment when she would finally step out of the shadows, the quiet ones. Her grandfather had taught her, always had the advantage of surprise, and Elena's surprise was going to reshape everything. The wedding invitation arrived on cream-colored paper with gold embossing. It's delivered to Elena's temporary residence at the Four Seasons. She'd moved out of the penthouse the week before, ostensibly to give Marcus space during the divorce proceedings, but really to begin establishing her independence publicly. Rebecca Ashford and Marcus Sinclair request the honor of your presence. Elena read the formal script twice, marveling at the audacity. They were inviting her to witness her own replacement, to sit in the audience, while another woman claimed the throne she was abandoning, or so they thought. The venue was the Astoria Estate in the Hamptons, a sprawling mansion with manicured grounds rolling down to the ocean. Elena knew it well. She'd attended dozens of events there over the years. More importantly, she knew its owner, Harrison Astoria, whose investment firm held a significant but carefully hidden stake in Titan. Global Harrison had been one of her grandfather's closest friends. Elena picked up her secure phone and dialed. Whitmore, James. They've set a date. 6 weeks from today. Ambitious timeline. Marcus must be eager to make it official before the Aurora situation explodes, or before anyone looks too closely at the company's books. Elena walked to the window of her suite, watching the city bustle below. I assume our preparations are on schedule? Better than scheduled. The proxy votes are secured, the board presentation is finalized, and our media strategy is in place. Though I must ask, are you certain about the timing? We could move earlier. Avoid the circus of the wedding entirely. Lena smiled, thinking of Rebecca's triumphant smirk at the divorce announcement. No, James, they want a coronation? They'll get one. But not the kind they're expecting. Over the next few weeks, Elena played her role to perfection. She appeared at charity luncheons looking elegant but fragile, accepting sympathy from the society wives who whispered about poor Elena's dignity in the face of such public humiliation. She hired a well-known but ultimately ineffective divorce attorney, a man known more for his media appearances than his courtroom victories. To all observers, she was the discarded wife, going through the motions, destined for a comfortable but quiet retirement funded by Marcus's guilt money. Meanwhile, in the shadows, Lena Sinclair was becoming someone else entirely. She met quietly with investigative journalists, providing them with carefully curated documents about Titan Global's financial structure. Nothing that could be traced back to her, but enough to plant seeds of doubt about Marcus's leadership and the Aurora deal's long-term viability. She had lunch with David Chen and 2 other board members, ostensibly seeking advice about her future investments. In reality, she was demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of corporate finance that surprised them all. Most importantly, she began making herself visible in ways that had nothing to do with Marcus. She gave a keynote speech at the Women in Finance Summit. She joined the board of the Metropolitan Museum. She started appearing in business journals, not as Marcus Sinclair's wife, but as philanthropist and investor Elena Sinclair. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. She was stepping into her own identity, preparing the world to see her as something more than Marcus's abandoned spouse. The week before the wedding, she received an unexpected call. Elena, Harrison Astoria. Harrison. Elena had known this. Call would come. I assume you're calling about the wedding? Among other things. I wanted you to know that several of us are comfortable with the situation. Marcus's behavior has been disappointing, and this Rebecca woman, double quotes, He paused diplomatically. Well, she lacks your class, Alina smiled. Harrison was fishing, trying to gauge her emotional state and her intentions. He was also, whether he knew it or not, providing her with valuable intelligence. I appreciate your concern, Harrison, but I'm moving forward with my life. In fact, I've been meaning to discuss some investment opportunities with you. Perhaps we could meet after all the wedding. Drama settles down? Investment opportunities? His interest was immediately piqued. Harrison might be old society, but he was also a shark who could sense money in the water. I've been rather more involved in managing my family's assets than most people realized. Grandfather's legacy is ... substantial, and I'm finally in a position to be more active in the market. The silence on the other end was profound. Alina could practically hear the gears turning in Harrison's mind as he recalculated everything he thought he knew about her financial situation. Alina said carefully, perhaps we should have that meeting sooner rather than later. I'm hosting a small gathering tomorrow evening, nothing formal, just a few friends discussing market opportunities. Would you be interested in joining us? Alina's pulse quickened. Harrison's informal gatherings were legendary, the kind of meetings where billion-dollar deals were sketched out on cocktail napkins and market strategies were born over 30-year-old scotch. I'd be delighted. The gathering was everything she'd hoped for. Alina sat quietly for the first hour, listening as titans of industry discussed global shipping routes, commodity futures, and the ripple effects of recent trade agreements. When she finally spoke, it was to point out a flaw in someone's analysis that had escaped everyone else's notice. The Aurora merger, she said quietly, assumes that current shipping costs will remain stable. But if you factor in the new environmental regulations coming out of the EU, plus the labor disputes in 3 key port cities, the cost structure becomes untenable within 18 months. The room fell silent. Alina had just demonstrated a deeper understanding of Marcus's flagship deal than some of the experts around the table. Where did you come across this analysis? Asked Margaret Foster, the CEO of Atlantic Maritime. Alina smiled mysteriously. I've always been good at seeing patterns others miss. My grandfather taught me to look at the spaces between the obvious. As the evening wound down, she found herself surrounded by some of the most powerful people in finance, all suddenly very interested in her perspective on various market trends. She answered their questions with quiet authority, revealing a depth of knowledge that shouldn't have been possible for a traditional corporate wife. Harrison walked her to her car personally, a courtesy he rarely extended to anyone. Alina, he said, his voice thoughtful, I have a feeling we've all been underestimating you for a very long time. Perhaps, she replied, though I prefer to think of it as finally being ready to be properly estimated. The wedding was 3 days away. Marcus and Rebecca were putting the finishing touches on their fairy tale, completely unaware that the quiet woman they'd dismissed was about to rewrite their entire story. The invitations had been sent. The stage was set, and Alina Sinclair was ready for her debut. The morning of the wedding dawned with crystalline perfection, not a cloud in the sky, temperature hovering at a perfect 75 degrees. With just enough ocean breeze to keep the air fresh, without disturbing the elaborate floral arrangements. It was the kind of day that photographers dream about and brides pray for. Rebecca stood before the floor-length mirror in the bridal suite of the Astoria estate, admiring her reflection in a custom Valentino gown that had cost more than most people's annual salary. The dress was a masterpiece of silk and French lace, designed to make her look like a princess ascending to her throne. And in a way she was. Today she would officially become Mrs. Marcus Sinclair, wife of a billionaire, queen of an empire. The girl from Queens who'd clawed her way through business school on scholarships and student loans was about to claim the ultimate prize. You look incredible, gushed her sister and maid of honor, adjusting Rebecca's cathedral-length veil, like something out of a fairy tale. Rebecca smiled, but her eyes held the cold satisfaction of a predator who'd finally cornered her prey. This wasn't a fairy tale. It was a corporate takeover disguised as a love story. She'd identified Marcus as her target 2 years ago, studied his weaknesses, positioned herself perfectly, and executed a flawless strategy. The timing had been crucial. Marcus's marriage to Alina had been dying a slow death for years. She'd simply accelerated the process. Alina was old-fashioned, passive, content to play the role of decorative wife. Rebecca was modern, aggressive, a partner who could match Marcus's ambition with her own. She'd made herself indispensable at the office, then irresistible in his bed. She'd stroked his ego while stoking his dissatisfaction with his increasingly exotic, distant wife. She'd been patient, strategic, brilliant, and now she was about to reap the rewards. "Mrs. Sinclair has such a nice ring to it," she murmured to her reflection. Meanwhile, in the groom's suite, Marcus was experiencing his own moment of triumph. At 52, he felt like he was starting over, trading in his museum piece wife for a Ferrari model. Upgrading from comfortable complacency to passionate engagement, Alina had been perfect for his younger self. When he needed the credibility that came from marrying into old money, her family connections had opened doors, her inherited wealth had provided early backing, and her flawless social graces had smoothed his entry into the highest circles of power. But success had changed him. He no longer needed her connections. He had his own. He no longer needed her money. He'd built his own fortune. And her quiet elegance, once so appealing, now felt like living with a beautiful ghost. Rebecca made him feel alive again. She challenged him, excited him, saw him not as he'd been, but as he was becoming. With her by his side, he could conquer anything. "Nervous?" asked his best man. Jonathan Hayes, Senator Hayes's son, and Marcus's college roommate, excited Marcus, replied, adjusting his custom tuxedo. "I feel like my real life is finally beginning." Jonathan nodded, though something in his expression suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable with the situation. He'd known Alina for years, had watched her transform from a brilliant Harvard graduate into the perfect corporate wife. He'd always suspected there was more to her than met the eye. But today wasn't about Alina. Today was Marcus's day. The guests began arriving at 4 o'clock, a parade of power and wealth that read like a Forbes list. CEOs and senators, hedge fund kings and tech moguls, all gathered to witness the union of two titans of industry. Elaine's arrival caused a ripple of shock through the assembled crowd. She stepped out of a vintage Rolls-Royce, wearing a suit of midnight blue silk that hugged her curves perfectly. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo, and she wore the Croft family sapphires, a magnificent necklace and matching earrings that caught the afternoon light like captured stars. "She looked regal, untouchable, dangerous," whispered David Chen to Margaret Foster as they watched Alina glide through the crowd. "She doesn't look like a woman who's been discarded. She looks like a woman who's been... unleashed." Margaret nodded, studying Alina with new eyes. "I had lunch with her last week. Did you know she speaks fluent Mandarin? Oh, and her analysis of the Asian shipping markets was more sophisticated than anything our research department has produced." "Really?" David's eyebrows rose. "How does a society wife become an expert in international logistics?" "Maybe," Margaret said slowly, "she was never just a society wife." Alina took her seat in the third row, a position that was carefully calculated. Close enough to be seen, far enough to avoid appearing confrontational. She nodded politely to familiar faces, accepted condolences and support with gracious dignity. But those who looked closely might have noticed something unusual in her posture. She didn't look like a victim attending her own funeral. She looked like a chess master watching the final moves of a long, complicated game. The ceremony began promptly at 5 o'clock. Marcus stood at the altar, looking every inch the conquering hero, while Rebecca floated down the aisle in her cloud of silk and lace. The officiant spoke of love and partnership, of two souls joining as one. Alina watched it all with the serene calm of someone observing a play. She'd already seen rehearsed a dozen times. When the officiant asked if anyone had a reason why these two should not be wed, the silence stretched for exactly the prescribed dramatic pause. Alina remained perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her expression unreadable. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant declared. "You may kiss the bride." Marcus swept Rebecca into his arms with theatrical passion and the crowd erupted in applause. Flash photography captured the moment from every angle: the triumphant groom, the radiant bride, the fairy tale beginning of their new life together. Alina clapped politely along with everyone else, her smile pleasant and appropriate. The reception was held in the estate's grand ballroom, with French doors thrown open to reveal the ocean sparkling in the distance. A jazz orchestra played soft background music. While guests mingled over champagne and caviar, Alina moved through the crowd like a diplomat at a state function, engaging in polite conversation while her mind cataloged every detail. She noted which board members seemed uncomfortable, which investors were asking pointed questions about Titan Global's recent performance, which reporters were already crafting tomorrow's headlines. She was particularly interested in the cluster of conversations happening around Harrison Astoria, who was holding court near the champagne fountain. As the evening's host and a major player in the shipping industry, his opinions carried significant weight. "Lovely ceremony," she said, approaching his group during a lull in the conversation. "Alina." Harrison's greeting was warm but careful. "You look magnificent. How are you holding up?" "Beautifully, thank you. Though I must say I'm more interested in looking forward than backward. Speaking of which, I've been following the discussions about the new Panama Canal expansions. Fascinating implications for global shipping routes." The conversation that followed was a masterclass in strategic intelligence gathering. Lena demonstrated not just knowledge but insight, discussing the geopolitical implications of trade route shifts and the technological innovations that would drive the next generation of logistics. By the time she excused herself, every person in Harrison's circle was looking at her with new respect and considerable curiosity. The traditional toasts began as dinner wound down. The best man gave a sentimental speech about college friendships. The maid of honor gushed about Rebecca's determination and beauty. Various family members shared embarrassing stories and heartfelt wishes. Then Marcus himself took the microphone. He stood in the center of the dance floor, bathed in golden light, Rebecca glowing beside him. In her fairy tale dress, he thanked the guests, praised his new wife's brilliance and beauty, and spoke eloquently about new beginnings and second chances. Then, in a moment of supreme confidence or supreme arrogance, he decided to address the elephant in the room. "Also want to acknowledge my past," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent ballroom. "My marriage to Alina taught me valuable lessons about partnership and commitment. While our marriage wasn't meant to last, I'm grateful for the years we shared and the growth they enabled. Her presence here tonight demonstrates the maturity and grace with which we've both handled this transition." A ripple of polite but uncomfortable applause followed. Marcus was rewriting history in real time, casting Alina as a stepping stone in his journey toward true love rather than a partner he'd callously discarded. Alina sat perfectly still, her face an mask of serene composure. But something flickered. In her eyes, a spark of cold fire that hadn't been there before. Harrison Astoria, watching from across the room, felt a chill run down his spine. In that moment, Lena Sinclair looked exactly like her grandfather in the seconds before he destroyed a business rival who'd made the mistake of underestimating him. Marcus handed the microphone back to the wedding coordinator, a nervous woman, who'd been trying to keep the evening running smoothly despite the underlying tensions. "That was beautiful, Marcus," she said, her voice slightly shaky. "Rebecca, you must be so happy. And Alina, you've been so gracious throughout this entire evening, perhaps. Would you like to say a few words to wish the happy couple well?" Suggestion hung in the air like a bomb with a lit fuse. The bell,